Stuart Bern from JLL. We spend a lot of our time going out and listening to clients globally within the market and hearing about their challenges that they may be having and some of their pain points. And I just wanted to share one story before we got started. I was with a CEO of a probably $35 to $40 billion real estate investment firm in Florida 1 to 2 weeks ago. And I asked him, what keeps you up at night? Right? A question that we ask a lot. And I was anticipating his response to be something around technology, transformation, AI, something around one of those investments, investors. And the answer that he actually gave, I really loved. He thought about it for a second and he said, it's actually people. It's people that kept him up at night, making sure that he had the right talent on the bench, having the right leaders, and that he really had his people cared for. So a lot of what we're going to do today in the next 45 minutes is talk about how to lead and how to lead with technology being the forefront and center within our industry today. So we have some phenomenal leaders from our industry that are here with us today. David, Kevin, Susan, and Tim, thank you all for joining. And I want to kick it off with leadership. So innovation cycles are faster, and the pressure to adopt, as you guys know, is higher. And the noise level, as we all have been experiencing, is constant. So I would like to know from you guys, how has your specific leadership style evolved to move beyond just adopting new technology and instead ensure that it's delivering measurable business impact? And Susan, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it's constantly framing, what we're trying to solve for, framing around what it is that we're trying to solve for. As far as instead of, what can this tool do? And we're constantly chasing shiny objects, I think, in this industry and many industries, but it's really about, again, what is it that we're trying to solve for? And as it relates to our workflows and the people within that, how do we, empower those people to solve these problems and enable them through the technology that's available? And it's just, and because it's changing so fast, it's almost like, we have to constantly upskill our people for whatever environment that we're in.
Yeah, great answer. Kevin?
Yeah, I agree. I think the identification of the core problem is really key. Whether it's a process that's broken you're trying to fix, whether it's an initiative that you think will make you more efficient, it's really identifying the core issue you're trying to solve, the problem you're trying to solve. There's so many really cool new gadgets out there. At this conference, at every other conference, it's hard to not be meeting with someone 24/7 who's got a cool new toy to show you. And there's a lot of them. Some of you may have some that you want to chat about, and that's great. As an individual who runs an organization that is tasked with finding the best way to operate, it's really up to us to really focus on that problem and then go to the potential solutions that we think could be key to that. And at the center of it all, just like you were told by the CEO you talked to, is how it impacts the people that actually are going to be implementing and rolling out that process, that technology tool. So it really starts with the problem and then really think about how the impact on the people is taken into account.
David, how has your approach changed when it comes to leadership, even thinking back 2 years ago?
Yeah, I think starting my career, I was definitely more disruptive. I had this idea that we could do so much and accomplish so many more things than we actually could. And project planning was a huge change in the way I grew, in the essence of we're all finite resources. We can get these tools and give these tools to people to be successful. But the reality is if I'm looking at what our project scope should be, we're really only going to be able to focus on maybe 2 or 3 game-changing things that we can do, and it may take years to develop. And that reality coming to play and makes a lot of decisions that we make because of the size of our team. So we have a smaller team. We only have about 12 people on the technology staff. and we're managing 44,000 apartment units, and we're part of a larger organization that manages 65,000 units. You can imagine the economy of scale, and what we're trying to achieve has to be very thought out. So that's been my change.
Yeah, so I can only imagine that there are a few prop tech startups, vendors, and individuals in this room that are interested in hearing answers from this side of the table. And I think, as you alluded to, David, there might be 2 or 3 different bets that you're going to place. And that seems to be one of the hardest decisions that us as leaders need to face going into 2026 and 2027. How do you decide, Tim, where technology should truly transform your business versus where it should simply make existing work better or more efficient?
It's really hard to determine that answer, but I'm here today with really 2 perspectives. One is, as an AI company in multifamily CapEx, we work with 27 of the top 50 multifamily owners. I just see this playing out every day. The other one, really, and I think since we're talking about leadership, it's going to be primarily my perspective for this panel, is just as a group of people creating a business ourselves. We're running a business, we're hiring people, we are building things, and that type of stuff. And what I see my own company struggle with the most, and really our customers that are adopting this AI, is what's the problem? You can get into a room and you can say, I need this solution, and it's shiny, and you can take that conversation really, really far. But then if you say to folks, yeah, but what are you trying to solve? Can you boil it down? Can you say it in one sentence clear? What really is the problem? Get to one sentence. That could take weeks. It can take many meetings. It could take a lot of debate, tears to get there. But if you can get there, that's where we see this being really the best place to start from, is a one sentence clear articulation of what are you trying to do.
How are you, Susan?
Yeah, I mean, ditto. It's funny. We have this internal competition about, and it's to really source solutions around AI for problems. And the biggest struggle for our teams is problem definition. Mm-hmm. And it goes back to that, it's really back to the basics. It's not just also what we're trying to solve for, but remembering our North Star, like, what are we here to do? And, at the end of that is, our client and then our people, and then, how do we deliver those outcomes? And so it sounds so simplistic, but it's not. It's like when you're in these meetings and you're like, what is it that we're arguing about? What are we trying to solve for? And that clear articulation, like you just mentioned, is hard. So.
You had mentioned that at your organization, you guys have something called an Innovation AI Task Force. Do you mind telling us a little bit more about that and how it's structured?
Yeah. So it's a cross-functional, by people in the field and leaders group that are focused on specific areas where different areas, like whether it's content creation or reviewing and analysis, and then looking at workflows where these solutions can be applied to remove some friction points. While we're doing that, then some of those scalable solutions will get bubbled up to fit kind of our enterprise plan. But we found like experimentation's happening in the field. It's going to. So in order to not kill innovation, not kill engagement, incorporate them, make them part of the solution. So the task force just, relatively new. We started somewhere around November, but it's surfacing a lot of, it's also helping us define these problems that we didn't even know existed. Mm-hmm. So.
How many individuals in the room does your organization have a similar structure set up today? 1 or 2? Yeah, I think one thing that we were hoping as we were preparing for this particular session was to make sure that we talked both strategically about where the industry is going, but also had some takeaways that were practical and actionable that you guys could leverage back at your organizations after the conference. Kevin, you mentioned that at your organization you have something similar, more of a product committee.
Mm-hmm.
We'd love to hear more about that.
You know, you asked a question about how you change your leadership style. One of the things that I've learned more and more as I've gotten younger is that I don't know very much. And the reality is I know less and less every day because things are changing so rapidly. And so one of the things that we determined to do was to establish a group of people who are smarter than me who can come together and help us make these decisions. So we developed a product committee. Our organization, RKW Residential, is an organization owned by a technology company. That's our parent company. And so we have the benefit of that expertise, that brain power. And so that part of that team, part of our operating team, our marketing team, our product team in the multifamily space, they have formed a committee, and the first task in charter of that committee is to identify the problem. Mm-hmm. The problem identification can come from feedback from a client, from a resident customer, from an associate on our team. It also can come from what I call the workaround issue. When you visit communities, when you visit regions, you often find teams have figured out how to do things differently to make it faster or easier. Yeah. That's a real problem. Mm-hmm. If they're working on solutions themselves individually, clearly something was going wrong. And so identify the problem. That group then determines, is this an improvement or is this a radical change? And then we take steps to implement based on that decision-making process. So it's really about that group of people helping us kind of figure out how to chart the path forward.
David, how do you think more holistically around filtering what actually solves problem you're trying to solve for versus what's just interesting technology?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think one thing we focus on is an asset catalog. So we have a technology catalog. And one of the reasons why we created that was because we wanted to articulate to our owners, because we're third-party management, what's our current technology stack and what solutions may address your needs versus something that you maybe think would be creative, but we already have something in place that'll do it. There's the mentality that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. We all know that. And if you're complaining a lot, you're maybe not making quantitative decisions. So we do try to make sure what we're focused on is a quantitative decision, that we're focused on what's going to help the organization as a whole and not maybe just a one-off that might only help a singular owner. So that's obviously something that's key. Disruptive technology, there's a lot going on in AI. We see a lot of things that are standing up right now that may be a shiny coin, or it could be something that's really adds value to the organization. So we want to make sure in our project planning and in our committees, our objectives are measured, outcomes are measured, and just because we installed the technology doesn't mean it adds value. We need a feedback loop that makes sure that there's an add value to the projects that we're planning. So through feedback loops is critical, because I think IT has this mentality that, well, we installed it. It's got to be good. It's got to be better than what we had before. The reality is that's probably not true. You could have made the situation worse. Yeah. So we obviously want to make sure we're continuously training and providing that feedback loop that it adds value.
How many of you guys have limited budgets?
I mean,
I'll take it from the left that resonates. So let's make this real, right? You have 5 initiatives. They all have champions. They all make sense. What's the actual framework that we should use to make the call? What's the one criterion? I'll start with you, David.
We're a hybrid model. So from a framework perspective, we don't actually, there's agile, waterfall, PMP, there's Kanban, there's all these different methodologies that exist. Gartner would say throw them all away, right? What Gartner actually tells you in real world practice is look at the things that work best for your organization and implement them. So that would be my first thought on that, is make sure you're using the methodology that works for your company. After you build your framework, your governance process, which I think everyone's in agreement that is a good idea to create, we're looking at how we can instill change in a positive way, and incorporate training whenever possible that just clearly adds value. So I'm kind of repeating myself if you haven't figured this out, but let's look back. What happened with Blockbuster? Does anybody want to tell me what happened with Blockbuster?
Gonna watch the play-by-play video?
Yeah, why'd they go out of business? You know, they were a VHS company. Why did they actually fail? They failed because of their transformation and their agility wasn't there for streaming services, and streaming services took them out.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what happened to them. We can't be that, right? So and as you get larger as an organization, guess what? It gets harder. A smaller startup company, you'll find that startup companies, they're 5 times into changing what their entire business model is before they find something that sticks. And they're very agile. And when you're larger, the agility decreases because you're going to have more people that are adversity to change because your organization is larger. So we got to focus on these smaller groups, which looks at change in a positive way. They're champions of change, and they want to look at how they can install or set something up that adds value to the organization. Smarter people than me, which is great.
I love the answer. Everything goes back to people for me. My first and primary criteria when we're at the final stages of deciding is what impact is it going to make to the on-site team. We're a third-party manager. That's all we do. We don't own any real estate. We third-party manage, and so we serve our clients. And if my on-site team is not the most efficient it can be, if my on-site team doesn't buy into what we're doing from a technology standpoint, the process that we've implemented, then we are not going to be successful. And so we have to make decisions based on what can make that job easier, the job of serving our customer easier. Doesn't mean that the structure of that team is going to be the same tomorrow as it was today or yesterday. Doesn't mean anything like that. However, there are always going to be people involved in our process, in my view. And so we've got to make decisions that are primarily related to how can we ensure that team has the tools they need to be the most efficient and effective in serving the customers the best way they can.
Great answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think both of those are incredibly true. I'll add a third perspective. I think it's complementary. And again, just as a group of people building a business, we're working on this small computer vision model that takes videos from TikTok and YouTube, and then you can track your assets and their remaining useful life and their CapEx better. And our goal on that is a 3x compute jump in the next couple months, 300%, because there's jumps you can do at AI, just insane, like 300%. And that's the context, but such a human answer to this is if you were working on something and you can't measure it, working on the problem, you've got a clear definition, but you can't measure it, it's probably going to fail. And I was in an engineering review, it was last week, you would think, oh, AI companies maybe have this figured out. We do not. The team is presenting out the initiatives that we're doing that all ladder up to this 300% jump. And we had 17 initiatives. And as you're going through 17 initiatives, it was really clear that not all 17 of those could be actually measured. It was a nice to have. It was like, there's nothing wrong with that, but what is that actually going to do? And it was like, at the end of the day, 9 of those 17 were laddering up to this quality issue that we're looking at, because quality is important. But do you need 9 to that? And it wasn't that clear. And that is just a really human change management thing, whether you're in real estate or in AI or in finance or whatever. If you can name the problem, you can measure it, then you can almost always enact that change. And we got caught up in that last week. So now we have 6 initiatives and they have KRs, and a couple people are upset about, I'm sorry that didn't make the list, but we all got recentered as a team that we were going to make more progress quicker by doing that. So measure it is my
it's funny,
my head.
I thought as an AI company, if you didn't know kind of where to go next, you just ask Claude.
Right.
You don't do that.
You can absolutely do that, but whether it's AI or any technology, it just comes back to the people. It's about people aligned to a vision and a mission, and the human change management is, at the end of the day, 99% of what we're working on.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
that's exactly right. A couple of things, just my simple answer would be, that, as you grow as a company, as things get more complex, it is harder to stay agile. And what lives, what dies, processes, technologies, it goes back to what is it, again, that we're trying to achieve. So, how we want to service our clients, how we want to empower our people, what are our objectives. If there's a misalignment there, because everybody has their own agendas internally, and those can be competing constantly. So alignment is really important. Being able then to measure against what the objectives were for the business are critical to knowing what lives and what dies. Even if you're personally invested in something, sometimes you got to say, see ya.
Yeah.
It's over.
Yeah. So alignment, governance, and people were some of the themes that I heard. I think, Susan, you used the phrase when we were talking earlier, experimentation with guardrails.
Yeah.
What does this actually look like in practice? And going back to the people, how do you give people room to innovate without things going off the rails?
Oh gosh, it's so hard. We, a lot of communication about what you can and cannot do in this experimentation, and creating environments or sandbox environments for people to experiment. But we've had issues already where things have gone outside of what would be considered safe. But those are good. You take those, we've learned from that, and then you communicate those as a case study out. And then we're getting back from the field a lot of is this safe? Can we do this? So it's hard because we want to balance that experimentation and the speed, and again, not killing people's ingenuity. But it's all about communication training on top of it. So that'd be my answer.
So now we have some of the structure in place, but now we have to align across departments, right? We have HR, we have operations, we have IT, we have different business units to make sure that this innovation is actually scaling across the organization. So the question is, how do we do that? And I'll start with you, David. Talk about requiring project plans that sometimes is needed. Talk a little bit more about that and how you guys are doing that within your organization.
Sure. We have a plethora of documents that basically, congratulations on being part of a team and a work group, and here's all the great things that you're going to achieve. I mean, that's obviously something that's necessary, right? The guardrails. So we have a document that standardizes our practices and says, as a work group member, you're going to be meeting these roles, and this is what your achievements are. Has anybody been in a college program of any sort and you're put in a work group? Okay, what's the first thing that happens? Everyone's crickets. Nobody wants to talk, and there's that one person in the group that you hope does everyone's homework.
Yep.
Am I right? Is that pretty accurate for everyone's existence in college and high school and everything else since then? Okay, so one thing we do is we give somebody a chair position in the work group, and their responsibility as the chair is to collaborate and work with the group to hopefully come up with an idea, a thought, or document some kind of strategy. We obviously put on the work group team members that make sense. So if you're working on maybe a maintenance project, it's probably not a good idea that you throw a bunch of HR in there, right? So obviously the group is diversified by the need of the project. So it's not always the same people who are champions. One thing we'll also do, which is kind of unique, is that we do a lot of our training as the person that, as a member of the work group, is also the person who's the trainer. And we did this for multiple reasons. One, because our training group's too small, that they can't manage all projects, but they also aren't the champion of what was just created. It gives the people the opportunity to get excited about it, talk to their peers, and get out there that, hey, this is what we're trying to achieve, and what's your thoughts and how we should achieve it. So that's traditionally how we govern our work groups. So we create work groups, is long and short, but not like the cool ones in college. Way back.
If you have the same problem in different parts of the organization, how do you then create awareness and alignment across the organization? And Susan, I think you emphasized communication, so I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, like that goes even back to our task force, because the way that we're structuring up these subcommittees is to be able to identify problems that are or friction points that would cut across multiple departments and solve for that issue. So it's awareness, and you got to surface and communicate what it is you're trying to solve for, or you're going to get groups, teams that are going to come up with their own solutions, and you got to do it with some level of urgency too. So.
You just mentioned the word urgency. How many of you guys are fairly back-to-back today with meetings? Almost everyone. So I don't think this is a question we actually ask frequently enough, is how do we intentionally slow down? Or maybe even stop? So we talk a lot about moving faster, but I think, Tim, you talked a little bit in our prep about maybe even knowing something's moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And how do we pull the plug early?
I would love to see all of real estate move a lot faster. I mean that nicely as someone in it, because I think that we can. I think that we can do better for our residents if you're multifamily, or for our tenants if you're commercial. We can achieve better returns for our investors. I was really inspired by watching the Olympics this last. Normally, not like sentimental about this, but I thought it was like a very human Olympics, just the stories and stuff. The speed skaters are a great illustration in my mind of the answer to your question, because the ones going fastest in a straight line are actually cutting side to side, and they're cutting side to side faster than the others, but the net, trajectory is forward. And I just think that's. I'm back-to-back most days, and we work with people who are back-to-back most days, and it's like, well, how do you get anything done if we only just talk to each other all day? Unequal progress is what I'd recommend. It might be your company's number 5, but it's a really clear problem. It's very measurable. You've got an excited team or person there, and you think you can really just go knock it out. Yeah. And I would just say, screw that it's number 5, just go knock it out. Celebrate it, get it off your list, and then what's your next thing? That stand it up, knock it down, stand it up, knock it down. That for me is our trick as an industry to go faster.
100%.
Slowing down to speed up, being intentional, focusing, being present, everything that you just mentioned. We need to circle back to the leadership side of things. We have some phenomenal leaders on the stage today. We've covered a little bit about strategy and structure, but let's talk a little bit about the human side. So where has technology most changed how you lead? Let's think about visibility, communication, decision-making, whatever it is that stands out. Be interested to hear quickly from each of you guys.
I'll go. I think, faster access to information is an easy one. Easier ability to communicate large scale, quickly, to get a message out, to get answers, that's a really important one. I think the last 5 or 6 years, our industry has sped up a great deal on innovation and technology implementation after, I think, at least reputationally having been really slow in that way.
I was talking about the other people, not you.
Yeah, of course. I knew that for sure. So it's important that we remember all that we focus on all that. One of the things that we do as an organization when we're identifying a challenge, a situation we're dealing with, is in leadership, it's really about boiling it down to one thing. A couple of people have mentioned too many balls in the air, juggling too many things, trying to focus on too many things at a time. I believe that strongly. And so we've literally identified a one thing. And so as a leader, I've evolved in the past. I would expect these 10 things need to be done next week, and that's just not reality. The reality is technology has allowed us to do more. However, it's important to focus on priorities. And so every leader in our organization, from myself to every department head, has one thing every quarter that they're focused on. And we do all of our work toward that one thing. It doesn't mean other things don't happen, but the priority for that quarter is this one thing. We gather the feedback at the end of that quarter, and then we determine whether we keep going down that path or we move to another one thing. And so those kinds of things that I've attempted to do, at least as a leader, to adjust how I look at things, how I approach problems and challenges, growth, all those situations that you face every single day, I think it made me better. Hopefully they made me better, but certainly will continue to evolve over time.
David?
I'd probably say that how many of you actually feel like you're technology in your own right? Like, I think everyone's role, if you're not in technology, your maintenance, your leasing agents, you can be in any role and position. And I think there's more and more responsibility that you're part of technology. And the training that you've received, integrating with the use of these tools, everything that we're doing and creating empowers you, but at the same account, you're elevating your own learning style and what you use on a day-to-day basis to be more successful in everything you do. So with the keynote speaker, I think had a good point about how he was talking about that through the evolution of people's careers, they're having more and more requirement for change, and technology is continuously evolving and changing. So you can't get comfortable with the technology because most likely that technology is going to change. So as humans, we're having to evolve along with these new tools that are become available to us. So how do we communicate that to the people that we work with? What can we do from a training perspective to make your job easier, that you're not adverse to change, but you find these tools useful, and how can you use them to enrich what you do every day in your current role? So I think that that's been a huge focus for us, is revamping our entire training program from the ground up. And it's not because they didn't do a great job as the predecessors in it. It was ready for the next evolution. And we had to look at how we were doing like augmentation. We use, as an example, we augment Yardi. That's our PMS. And we augment it with training material that actually real world walks you through how to use Yardi. Because at that time, Yardi didn't have that. So all these things we're building is to hopefully make it easier for people to use technology.
I think technology is increasing our velocity and our leverage, like the speed at which one person can move and then the amount that they can do. And if you go to like a kind of crazy example, but I think it makes the point, like a person before the Industrial Revolution versus a person after the Industrial Revolution, the amount of things that they could do and the impact of those things is higher, right? So then you can say, okay, well, there's other big technology improvements like the personal computer, cloud computing, SaaS, now AI. We don't know how big of a jump it will be. People are comparing it to an industrial revolution. It could be that, it could be something smaller, we don't know. But the velocity and the leverage, for me, what that leaves is trust. And the answer to what I think is most important in your leadership, even more important, is can people trust you? Can your team trust you? Can you trust yourself? It doesn't mean that you're right, that you didn't make a mistake, that you took a risk and it was the wrong one. It means at the end of the day, can you instill in the people around you the idea that you're working out of a value system, that you're trying to make the right decisions, that they believe you, that you're credible, that you're doing that, and that you can share that openly, transparency to those folks around you. So I think trust is really, really important in the age of AI because of hallucinations and like magic leaps and like, holy shit, what is this? It wasn't here 3 months ago. What's it doing now? Well, can you trust the human? That for me is the big one.
One thought that you sparked, I was reading a Harvard Business Review article that said that AI is actually not making us more efficient like it was supposed to do. It's actually making us in our work more intensified. And we're actually working more now than less because we're trying to develop tools off the side of our desk. We're now coding on the weekends. We're actually spending more time playing with this new technology during this experimentation phase than actually creating efficiencies. It's an interesting time period. And you prompted that thought as you were speaking.
Yes, and I think that's why you're seeing some of these technology companies go in with these bombastic cuts, is just because they've got 5% here, 10% here, 20%. They got all these like little things where they know it's there, but they can't systematize it. And instead of actually doing the work to systematize it, they're just like, look, if I have half the people, they'll figure it out. And that's one way that's really caustic. But I think that's why that's happening. I totally agree with it.
Forcing it. Yeah.
Want to be respectful of everyone's time. We only have a few minutes left, so we're going to leave with a Monday morning action after we all get back and recover from Vegas. So the last question, so we can all leave with something practical as well, is what's one specific thing, one action that everyone in this room can do differently starting Monday morning to become a more effective technology leader? We'll just do 30 seconds each, starting with you, Susan.
Okay. Look, I'm going to go back to the human side of things. It even goes back to the leadership piece. Obviously, stay aware, but we lead with 3 tenets on my team through our company. It's people, their passion, and their purpose. And I feel like you can't lose sight of that. Mm-hmm. So, as it relates to technology and the insights it delivers, I think that's just, I keep it within that frame. So it helps me lead better, understand, why people are doing what they're doing and to create a greater connection and to provide that clarity for people.
Love that.
I hope everybody's leaving before Sunday night because we can't do that many more days of Vegas. My answer is pick one thing that day or that week, your choice, and write it out until you can get it done that day or that week, and make it as small as you need, but get one thing totally done that day or that week, as small as it needs to be. Just get it done.
Yeah.
I didn't see many hands go up with this. Maybe more have it than raise your hand. But if you don't have a multi-functional, multi-department committee talking about technology and its impact on your business, highly recommend you do that. I would do that Monday morning for sure. If you're not quite ready for that, the next thing I would recommend would be ask your teams what's broken. Ask your team what process isn't working, and that'll help start you down the path of fixing some things that you probably don't even realize broken. But I would definitely start there.
I'm going to err on caution. So I'm actually old. Go figure. The .com industry, was the big hype way back in 2000-ish when .com came out, and it crashed. AI is going to do the same thing. That's my little crystal ball for you. And what do I mean by that? There's too many people in the space that are not all going to be successful. And it's going to determine where you put all your eggs. Okay, so if you put all your eggs in one basket, you might run into problems later because you're just not agile. So my recommendation to anybody is make sure your contracts with your vendors allow you the flexibility that if it's not meeting your need, you can quickly adjust and change course, that you can pivot and move in another direction. So agility, project governance, making sure there's a good feedback loop. Even within projects, there should be continuous feedback loop that says, is it meeting our needs? And if it isn't, stop. And you need to change direction. Don't feel just because you may have lost some revenue in creation. The reality is you need to pivot before you keep on dumping money into a problem. It's just going to get worse. So
thank you to all of our leaders on stage and for all of you guys for leading the industry. If there are any questions, I think we have a few minutes.
Yes, we do have 3 to 5 minutes for questions. If you'd like to raise your hand, I can bring the mic to you.
Unless we're holding you back from lunch.
Thank you. Just a quick question on you guys talked about the value chain of innovation, experimentation. Just curious, how do you keep score, right, on the initiatives that you do pick to, keep forward? Just general, right, as we go to our boards and committees, how do you guys keep score?
We use KPIs for sure. It goes back to the identification of the problem. And so once we've identified the problem, then it's a little easier to say, where do we want to go and what's success look like? And once we identified success, we have to figure out how to measure that. And so we identify, usually 3 to 4 KPIs that will help us kind of track progress. The first one is adoption. Because if it's not being adopted, we've done something wrong.
Yeah.
Either we picked the wrong path, or we haven't explained it well, or we haven't coached and trained it well. Something's gone wrong there. So start with adoption, and then depending on whatever else it is, what the initiative might be, 2 or 3 more KPIs that help you kind of track progress. We do it once a month, summarize it once a quarter, and then determine where we go from there.
Good question.
That's a great answer.
Hi, thank you. Everything you said was really helpful. My question is, on an executive level, what level of presence do you have on some of these committees or your AI task force, and where's the balance between that and your senior leadership? We have a ton of senior leadership presence, executive presence more so in a champion capacity, but sometimes that leads to some misalignment. And I'm wondering how you keep that on the rails.
I mean, I definitely am present for those major initiatives, like for the task force. So I'll represent and then be able to report back to our CEO to ensure to get buy-in, to gain alignment, but also then to, and if I need more support, I do that. So we look across the company and we'll hear about what's going on and whether or not that kind of fits the whole ecosystem, what we're trying to achieve. If we don't have presence there, we speak up and we make sure that there is some level of presence there. But I'd say that like our C-suite, there's always somebody that's representing in some capacity. And there's something that we didn't really talk about, but this is very important, is accountability or a RACI matrix of some sort, which goes back to governance. But the fact is that people don't really take that very seriously. And without it, things really fall apart fast.
Go ahead. I was just going to say one thing. I agree with all of that. And if it's my idea that I love, I am not involved in that one, because I don't want my influence, my position to steer a decision that might not be the right decision. I want it to be made in the most productive way. And I will certainly introduce it and say why it's important to me and why I love the thought of it. And we have to make sure we're doing the right thing. And sometimes I'm wrong. So if I'm really bullish on it, I step aside and let another member of our C-suite join that group and make sure that we're doing it objectively.
We use a project sponsor. So the project sponsor is responsible for going to the committee for making the recommendation of the solution that we're going to use. And we help them through the project planning to build the objectives and deliverables and the KPIs. And that's what they're actually given time to present it to the membership, which is designed by executive leadership and their representatives.
Just as a vendor, we see the other side of quite a few of these committees. And my personal take is it's less important the seniority of the committee, like all C-suite or SVPs or EVPs or whatever, or mix of. What's more important is that they're empowered to make decisions. However that happens, it doesn't matter. And then the highest functioning committees that we see generally go by a rule of 2. You need one executive sponsor and one executive go along. Like, I will buy this and I will use it. And instead of having like 11 people Roman vote style, like yes, just like the rule of 2 committees are going. So the committee sets the framework, it sets the priorities, sets the guidance, but then one of those members will say, I'm going to use this, and the other will say, I'll go along with that, and they're making decisions the fastest, we think.
I got one more thing to add to all of this, though. This is something that's really important when I think about this. Some people are really good at connecting dots and seeing and being more visionary, and you need those people. And then other people are very tactical and great at execution and planning that roadmap to get there. You need some diversity in this. It's funny because you mentioned about like stepping away. I don't, because I'm worried that there's no clarity about what maybe the future could look like. So I think it's really good to have a healthy, diverse, like the perspectives in the room, even more so than the seniority of that person.
All right, please, a round of applause for our amazing panel here. Thank you so much for joining us.